A young girl playing in her yard in Spokane, Washington, suddenly vanishes. In St. Louis, another girl leaves to visit a friend. She never arrives. Horrified parents worry their children have been abducted, or worse. When children go missing without a trace, detectives must use knowledge, experience, and science to find them and apprehend those who intend to harm them. In this episode, some of the names have been changed. In Spokane, Washington, it's usually the sounds of nature that greet residents each morning. But on the morning of October 18th, 1999, one neighborhood was awakened by the voice of 33-year-old Brad Jackson.
Valerie? Valerie? Valerie?
He was frantically calling out the name of his 9-year-old daughter, Valerie.
Valerie? Valerie?
The distraught father knocked on neighbors' doors, desperate to know if anyone had seen his daughter.
Valerie! Did you see my daughter? Is you Valerie? Valerie! Valerie!
At 8:44, he called 911 to report Valerie missing.
Your daughter's missing. How long has she been gone? Can I have your name, sir?
Within moments, deputies from the Spokane County Sheriff's Department responded to the call. Jackson told them that he had last seen Valerie playing in the yard at about 8:15.
Still here.
Several minutes later, when he came outside to walk her to school, Valerie's backpack was on the porch, but she was nowhere to be found.
She's gone. Is there anybody else she's authorized to go with? Another adult or a relative?
No.
Okay, stand by. We're going to get some more officers out here. Okay?
Sheriff's deputies and neighbors began searching the area in hopes that Valerie had decided to walk to school on her own or went to a friend's house.
Valerie!
Once those possibilities were investigated and ruled out, the search effort grew more intensive. A canine unit was called to the scene. Handlers scented the dogs with one of Valerie's shirts.
Yeah, what was the circumstance?
But their tracking turned up nothing.
She was out playing in the yard and
Valerie!
Spokane County Sheriff's Detective Dave Madsen was on the scene.
Anytime a child disappears, searching the residence for anything is very important to see if there's any evidence of foul play at the scene itself.
Has anybody noticed anything out of the ordinary this morning?
In this case, the residence belonged not to Brad Jackson, but to his parents, Dick and Karen Jackson.
Brad and Valerie had been living with Karen and Dick, his parents, for about 7 months.
Well, we moved in here because my girlfriend doesn't get along
Jackson,
with Valerie.
a single father with sole custody of Valerie, explained that he and his daughter had previously been living at his girlfriend's home.
Let's say stay.
They moved back in with his parents because the girlfriend did not get along with Valerie.
When was the last time you saw her this morning?
Valerie's mother had not been seen by anyone in the family for several years. Madsen questioned Jackson and his parents about when they last saw Valerie. His father, Dick, said he saw her the prior evening.
Before I leave and make sure that she's covered up and warm.
Before she went to bed, we talked and hugged, and she asked me if I was going to work. I worked in Portland. She asked me if I was leaving in the morning, and she asked when she would see me again, And I told her the following week, but that was the last time I seen her.
Jackson's mother, Karen, had seen Valerie at about 4:30 on the morning of her disappearance.
Usually before I left for work, I'd go in and always make sure, give her a little hug and kiss, which I did, and then I left for work.
I found out she was gone.
Brad Jackson told police again that he had seen Valerie playing in the yard before school.
Her backpack outside.
But about 15 minutes later, she was gone.
I mean, she has a long time.
Would it be okay if we took a look in Valerie's room?
Sure.
The Jacksons gave investigators permission to look around the house for anything that might explain what happened to Valerie.
You never know what you're going to find. You look for things that are out of place in their room.
Madsen examined Valerie's bed. He discovered blood spots on a pillow. Oddly, there was no blood on the case.
Why is there blood on the pillow here?
Sometimes
Jackson said his daughter had a nosebleed the night before.
Valerie did have nosebleeds, and usually when she did, she'd go to her dad and have her daddy help her take care of him.
she gets nosebleeds.
Jackson explained that Valerie got upset when she saw blood on her bedding,
Already washed them.
so he had washed and replaced the bedding just prior to Valerie's disappearance. Madsen looked for other evidence of a nosebleed, such as a bloody tissue, but found none. He instructed crime technicians to collect both the pillows and bed sheets for further examination. While searching the house, Madsen made a potentially important discovery: Valerie's diary. He instructed crime technicians to bag and collect it. Outside, police continued knocking on doors and asking neighbors if they saw or knew anything about Valerie's disappearance. No one had any helpful information. The neighbors told police Brad Jackson seemed like a devoted father and that Valerie was a very sweet girl.
We're going to ask him on ours too, but we don't know if we'll do it or not.
Madsen had three possible theories of what might have happened to Valerie.
The first was that she was abducted by an unknown abductor. The second being that maybe her birth mother or someone for her birth mother had came and took her. And then the third was that a family member had caused her to disappear, and that narrowed down to Brad.
To try to prove his suspicions, Madsen turned his attention to the items recovered from the house.
Not real specific, but yeah, it goes over.
He found some disturbing entries in Valerie's diary.
She was upset with her dad over a birthday party that she just had, like about 2 weeks before, and he embarrassed her. And then there was notations that he wasn't respecting her privacy, like in her bedroom, and was just coming in unannounced.
Less than a week before her disappearance, Valerie wrote about her father. "He won't leave me alone in my room."
There wasn't anything really concrete, but it did raise a red flag.
Madsen had Jackson's pickup truck towed to the sheriff's department. It was processed by forensic specialist Craig Kopic.
Take a swab of this. We approach it in a methodical fashion so that we don't overlook any evidence. In this particular case, we were looking for soil, hair fiber, body fluids.
Kopic first examined the exterior of the vehicle. He discovered several mysterious spots on the front passenger side bumper. He swabbed the residue in order to send it out for testing. For the truck's interior search, the door was pulled shut and the garage lights were turned off.
We used a forensic light source or an alternate light source to view the interior of the vehicle. Certain things such as body fluids and hairs and fibers will fluoresce, so we can document it and collect them.
Other than the mysterious residue on the bumper, no significant evidence was recovered from the truck. They would have to wait to see what the residue was. As investigators tried to make sense of the scant evidence, they feared they were wasting precious time. Valerie Jackson was missing. And if police didn't find her soon, they feared their missing persons case might become a homicide. In Spokane, Washington, 9-year-old Valerie Jackson had been missing for more than a week. The police had very little to go on. But they suspected that the girl's father, Brad Jackson, had something to hide. Madsen asked him if he'd take a polygraph exam.
Begin asking you a few questions here.
Jackson consented. It was administered by Larry Miller.
Did you cause the disappearance of your daughter on October 18th?
No.
On October 18th, were you the one who made your daughter disappear?
No.
The results of Brad Jackson's polygraph test clearly indicated that he was being deceptive to the relevant questions. The relevant questions included the specific issue of whether or not he was involved, responsible for the disappearance of his daughter on October 18th, and whether or not he knew the location of his daughter at the present time.
No.
As the results of the polygraph exam are not admissible in court, Jackson was released after taking the exam. If Jackson had harmed his daughter, then Madsen and his team would have to prove it.
Okay, bringing everyone up to date.
Madsen gathered a team of detectives to plan the next move. The test results from the mysterious residue found on the truck's bumper tested positive for human blood.
Brad's tentatively going to take a polygraph.
Time was running out, and the investigators were beginning to fear they would never find Valerie Jackson alive. They believed that if they followed Jackson, he might inadvertently lead them to the evidence they needed. But putting a full-time surveillance team on him would be nearly impossible. They had to find another way.
We've got his truck. Why don't we put GPS on his vehicles?
Someone came up with the idea of using the GPS to track his vehicle movements. We decided we were going to try to do that. The ultimate goal was hopefully for him to lead us to where Valerie was. Secondary goal was to find out who he was contacting, and so we could contact those people to do follow-up interviews with them in regards to anything they may know about the case or what Brad was doing.
If working properly, the GPS unit would transmit a signal to orbital satellites. Detective Don McCabe could then download that information on his computer and track everywhere Jackson's truck traveled in real time.
And that is printed out in latitude and longitude, date and time. It'll give you an address if you want the address.
Brad, before you leave,
With the unit installed, Madsen called Jackson to pick up his truck. The investigation team would now have to hope Jackson would lead them to Valerie. As he was handing over the keys, Madsen made a bold move.
I told him point blank that I knew he'd killed Valerie, and I knew that he probably buried her, that he didn't have time to bury her deep enough, that animals would dig her up, and we would find her body, and when we did, we would have the evidence we needed to convict him of murdering Valerie. His only reaction, and he, no emotion, no nothing, just looked straight at me and said, "I understand."
Jackson took the keys and drove off. And Detective McCabe was tracking his every move. Over the first couple of days, the GPS unit worked perfectly, and McCabe knew where Jackson's truck was at all times. Then, suddenly, the signal was lost. He could no longer watch Jackson in real time. McCabe would have to wait a few weeks and hope the unit was still recording the data.
Don McCabe in Spokane. Hey, I'm having a problem. I can't bring up the tracker. I've tried everything.
If the information was there, he would have to download it after the unit was taken off the truck.
There isn't any way that you can think of.
After more than 2 weeks, Madsen decided it was time to try to retrieve the tracking information. He got a warrant for deputies to seize Jackson's truck. Detective McCabe then removed the GPS unit. And with Madsen at his side, he began downloading the data. To their relief, within moments, the exact routes of Jackson's travels were displayed on a computer monitor.
There were a couple of places that really stuck out as, gee, that's a strange place for him to be. And one of the places was Vicari Road.
Is he going across I-90 and up Argonne now?
Yeah.
Vicari Road was located in a remote wilderness area 20 miles outside of Spokane.
He was there on the 10th of November for about 15 minutes, just short of 15 minutes. He then went directly from there up to the Springdale area, where he spent another almost 30 minutes in that area before coming back to Spokane.
Now, isn't that where you showed me on the 6th?
Springdale was also a remote and wooded location. It was an old abandoned logging site. Madsen believed these two stops meant his blunt warning to Jackson might have worked. Perhaps Jackson had buried his daughter's body at Vicari Road after her death. Now, fearing the body would be found, he exhumed it and buried it again in Springdale.
Everything else is in town.
Madsen assembled a team of investigators and took off for Vicari Road. Using a handheld GPS unit, Madsen located the exact spot where Jackson parked his truck.
This is our GPS locations where the vehicle stopped. I think that this is probably our best side of the road.
He then instructed his team to fan out over the area, looking for disturbed soil, footprints, clothing, or anything else out of the ordinary. The team included a cadaver dog and his handler.
Hopefully, we'll be able to find something and just look. If you see something, shout it out and check on it.
After only a few minutes, the dog picked up a scent near some overturned soil, a potential grave site.
Change over here. He's liking this.
All right, let's get him out of there. Kevin?
Madsen called forensic scientist Kevin Jenkins to the spot. Jenkins noticed a boot print.
It was pretty obvious when we got there. We just had to make sure not to disturb it. Once we were ready to process it, we used what's called dental stone. It's a hard plaster mixed with water at the scene and poured onto the site.
Jenkins made a cast of the print, knowing that later on it could be compared and possibly matched to boots owned by Jackson. Another forensic scientist, Bill Schneck, collected several soil samples from the area.
We wanted to look at the soil samples and compare it to any other physical evidence that may be in the suspect's environment, say his house or any tools or clothing that he may have.
Just as the team was getting ready to leave, they made another discovery. One of the investigators dug up 2 plastic grocery bags stuck together with duct tape. The bags appeared to be blood-stained, and hair was stuck to the duct tape. It was red hair, the same color as Valerie Jackson's. But they didn't find a body.
Led us to believe that most likely Valerie had been buried there and removed most recently.
Madsen and his team moved on to the second site Jackson had driven to days earlier in Springdale. They hoped that here they would find the evidence they so desperately sought. If not, they feared a suspected murderer would go free. In Spokane, Washington, 9-year-old Valerie Jackson had been missing for nearly a month. Her father, Brad Jackson, was the primary suspect. Investigators used GPS to locate a possible burial site for the missing girl. It was a heavily wooded, abandoned logging site.
This is where the GPS coordinates stop.
Investigator Dave Madsen's entire case depended on whether Valerie was buried somewhere in these woods.
We felt all along that if Brad was involved, there was no other explanation other than she was going to be dead.
He directed the team to first inspect the roadside for evidence. Almost immediately, they spotted tire tracks leading into the woods.
Kevin?
Forensic scientists Kevin Jenkins and Bill Schneck made a plaster cast of the track. Later on, they would compare the tire tread impression in the cast to the tires on Jackson's truck. The team then spread out and walked through the woods looking for overturned dirt or any other sign that might lead them to Valerie. Suddenly, a cadaver dog picked up a scent and led its handler to the origin. Madsen was called over and saw that the spot contained loose, overturned soil. The forensics team began a very delicate excavation of the site. Within moments, they found what they were looking for.
Hey, Dave, why don't you come here a minute? I think we got something.
Pink fabric, like the sweater Valerie was last seen in, and human tissue.
Looks like there's some.
The body of a young girl was then removed from the gravesite. It was later identified as that of Valerie Jackson.
Looks like.
It was very quiet when we found Valerie, when she was finally uncovered in the gravesite. You always want to find a child alive when they're missing. It was what we probably expected, but it was still, there was grief and remorse in regards to it because the finality, I guess, sunk in with people that she was in fact dead. And so, yeah, it was a sad moment.
With the recovery of Valerie's body, the investigation was far from over. The forensics team did another search of Jackson's home. They seized items that could potentially be linked to the evidence collected in the field. A roll of duct tape, 2 shovels, and a pair of boots belonging to Brad Jackson. Forensic scientist Bill Schneck, who had collected soil samples from both the Vicari Road and Springdale sites, was now collecting dirt from the wheel wells and floor of Jackson's truck.
By comparing soil samples from the truck and the crime scenes, we're looking for similarities in composition to see if the soil from the vehicles could have come from the crime scene.
At the same time, Kevin Jenkins was making an impression of the truck's tire to see if it matched the one cast at the site where Valerie's body was recovered.
To get a known impression from Jackson's truck, we apply a thin coat of petroleum jelly to the tire. We then very slowly roll the tire over white artboard. This applies the impression of the tire in the petroleum jelly onto the white artboard. We then can use black magnetic fingerprint powder to enhance that impression and make it darker.
As the investigation continued to move forward, the county medical examiner performed an autopsy on Valerie Jackson. Her report listed the cause of death as suffocation. Back at the state crime lab, Kevin Jenkins was comparing the tire impression taken from Jackson's truck to the cast he made in the field.
Ultimately, what we hope to find is what's called an accidental characteristic. An accidental characteristic is a nick or a cut, something that's not there from the manufacturer of the tire, or is there on many tires, something individual to that tire. If we can find that, then we will be able to say that that tire made that impression to the exclusion of all others.
Jenkins declared they were an exact match.
Matching up the tire print from the Jackson's vehicle to the tire print from the Springdale site, from the second burial site, was very important because it helped us to establish that Brad Jackson, or that vehicle, had been in that area.
Investigators had now placed Jackson's truck at the scene. Now they had to place him there. Forensic scientists began comparison testing on nearly 24 soil samples collected from both grave sites and Jackson's boots, shovels, and truck. Bill Schneck conducted the tests.
The soil analysis is rather significant because it tied the suspect, Jackson, to the grave site where Valerie was found. There was soil on his boots, soil on shovels, which was similar to the soil from the grave, so actually tied him going to the grave.
Forensic examiners were also able to lift fingerprints off the grocery bags from the Vicari Road site. The prints came back as a match to Brad Jackson. Madsen's case against Brad Jackson was now complete.
Obviously, the GPS was the biggest turning point. Without the GPS, there's a good chance we never would have found Valerie, and we may never have had the evidence to convict Brad in regards to this case.
During the course of the investigation, Brad Jackson threatened to take his own life. He was now being held at a local hospital on suicide watch. Doctors approved his release, and Madsen arrested him for the murder of his daughter.
Everything's good, Doc. Good physical health.
Police may never know why Jackson killed his daughter. He has never spoken about the crime. On October 5th, 2000, a jury found Brad Jackson guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced him to 56 years in prison.
I was very pleased that the jury convicted him, but I was also sad for his family because not only did they lose their granddaughter, and to Karen Jackson, Valerie was almost like a daughter, but they lost their son. So there's a lot of sadness for them.
Taking the life of a child is an unconscionable act. It's a tragedy that can strike even the safest neighborhoods. St. Louis, Missouri is a good place to raise a family. At least, that's what Rhonda Center thought. A single mom who shared a home with her friend, Thomas Siegel, Rhonda was raising her 10-year-old daughter, Cassidy, here. On December 1st, 1993, Rhonda arrived home from work. She greeted Siegel and asked if he knew where Cassidy was. Siegel said she had gone to a friend's home and was due back at 5 o'clock.
What do you want for dinner, huh?
It was now 10 minutes after 5. Cassidy wasn't usually late, so Rhonda called the friend's home to check on her.
Hi. Can you go ahead and send Cassidy home?
Her friend said Cassidy never arrived.
What do you mean? What are you talking about? She didn't make it. Are you sure? She said she never made it.
Never made it.
No. We've got to go find her.
Rhonda asked Siegel to help her look for Cassidy. While Siegel walked up and down the street calling out for Cassidy, Rhonda went next door.
Cassidy!
She asked if the neighbor had seen Cassidy that afternoon.
Have you seen my daughter, Cassidy? She didn't come home.
She had not.
Cassidy!
Siegel called the police. When the patrol car arrived, Siegel met it outside his house.
Your roommate?
He told the officer he last saw Cassidy at 3:30, and a neighbor reported seeing her at 3:45. She told Siegel she was going to a friend's house and would be back at 5 p.m. The same time her mother usually arrived home from work. Cassidy always carried a personal alarm when she went out to play.
Remember Mom showed you this?
As he had done many times before, Siegel checked the alarm to be sure it was working. He confirmed it was, then told Cassidy he'd see her at 5. She left and never returned.
Right? Okay? You kids have fun, okay?
Siegel described for police what she was wearing: a blue denim jacket, a pink sweatshirt, jeans, and white sneakers. Officers began canvassing the neighborhood, asking if anyone had seen Cassidy or any unusual activity. A canine unit was also called in to try to pick up Cassidy's trail. A short time later, Detective Laura Nearing of the St. Louis County Police Department arrived to investigate.
What made this case of particular interest was the fact that within the last 2 months before that, there were 2 other girls who were missing and later found killed. It brought it to our attention right away that we might be dealing with a serial offender.
About a block and a half away, a man found a personal alarm outside his home.
Finding the personal alarm gave us more of an indication that she was probably taken against her will, as opposed to just maybe being off with friends and not knowing about it. So it right away it started our focus as treating this as an abduction, as opposed to just a missing juvenile.
The man who found the alarm had not witnessed any unusual activity. The investigators decided to check with the people next door to see if they had seen anything. No one answered the door. They would have to come back later. Rhonda recognized the personal alarm as Cassidy's. Nearing asked for a recent photo of Cassidy. She then asked for permission to look through Cassidy's room for any clues as to what might have happened to her. In Cassidy's bedroom, crime technicians began collecting items that might have her fingerprints or DNA on them. A hairbrush, a videotape, a glass from the bedside table.
All right, guys.
If the unthinkable had happened, the prints and DNA would be needed to identify Cassidy. Nearing also searched Cassidy's backpack, looking through notebooks and reading notes passed between Cassidy and her friends.
We knew she just came home from school. We wanted to see if we could get an indication of who she might have been talking to, where she planned to go. A lot of times kids will write notes to each other. They'll write just their thoughts in books and things like that.
Detective Nearing was meeting with a team of detectives known as the Greater St. Louis Major Case Squad, or MCS. The squad was already investigating the deaths of 2 other girls who were first reported missing just prior to Cassidy's disappearance. One victim was a girl close to Cassidy's age. The other was 22 years old. The MCS detective suspected there was a link among the 3.
So it's very important that we compare notes, because as leads came in, if they weren't related to Cassidy Center, they could have been related to one of the other homicides, and those investigators needed to have that information also.
If these cases were linked, then a serial killer was prowling the streets of St. Louis, preying on young women and girls. And until he was caught, no one was safe. In 1993, St. Louis police feared a serial killer was on the loose when 10-year-old Cassidy Center went to visit a friend after school and never arrived. She was the 3rd girl to disappear. When news of her disappearance hit the papers, investigators printed new missing person flyers with a more recent photo of Cassidy and asked detectives to again canvass the neighborhood residents for information.
Hey, you guys, we got some new posters to get out.
Detective Nearing was especially interested in the house next door to the one where the personal alarm was found. Detectives had gone there on a daily basis since Cassidy's disappearance, but never found anyone at home.
Great, thanks.
This time, nearly a week after Cassidy was reported missing, Gloria Cooper answered the door. Detectives asked about her whereabouts since the disappearance.
Can you tell me where you were on
Cooper
December
explained
1st?
that she had to stay with some friends because the power company had cut off her electricity. It had only been turned on the day before. When asked about Cassidy, Cooper said she knew nothing. She also mentioned her brother, who sometimes lived with her.
10 days ago?
Detectives went to talk with Cooper's brother.
So where do you normally stay?
He told them because the electricity was off, he wasn't at the house the day she vanished.
Okay, so
He had to be at work at 4 p.m.
do you have something to verify that you're at work?
Sure, I mean, yeah, I got my time card.
Brooks showed the detectives his time card from December 1st. He clocked in at 4:07 and clocked out at 11:30 p.m., potentially clearing Brooks as a suspect.
Knowing that a neighbor saw her at 3:45 and he clocked in at 4:07, there wasn't much of a time there for someone to abduct somebody and potentially murder them in that short a span.
Police hit another dead end, but on December 9th, 8 days after Cassidy's disappearance, they got a break. Two teenagers were walking down a St. Louis alley when they noticed a bundle of blankets lying against a wall. As the boys approached, they were shocked to see a leg sticking out from the blankets.
When the city police arrived, they immediately suspected that this was Cassidy and knew what was going on. So they called us right away, which helped. We were able to get down there and be part of processing the scene and making sure all the evidence was obtained that we were going to need to help hopefully identify a suspect.
The body, a young girl wearing clothing that matched Cassidy's, was wrapped inside a curtain underneath a blanket.
The evidence at the scene didn't connect us to any particular person. We knew we had a comforter, a blanket, a curtain. We had these items, but we didn't know where they came from.
Looks like we got some tire tracks here.
Tire tracks were also found in the alley near the body.
Stuff out there.
Crime technicians took a dental stone cast of the track to use as evidence. Working from fingerprints taken from the victim, Detective Donald Bryan compared them to the print cards he made from the items recovered from Cassidy's room. Forensic scientists at the St. Louis Crime Lab examined the blanket found covering Cassidy for evidence that might lead them to the killer. They discovered several hairs that were later identified as coming from an African American. They also collected beige fibers and aluminum scrapings.
We were able to take the blankets and the curtains that she was found wrapped in. We were able to get pictures of that out. I believe that was even shown on the news, that if anybody recognizes these items, to contact us.
Investigators were still hoping for a lead that would point them to the killer, and they feared they were running out of time. Detectives were determined to find Cassidy's killer before he struck again. Detectives in St. Louis, Missouri found the body of 10-year-old Cassidy Center. She had been missing for 8 days. They feared she was the latest victim of a serial killer. Cassidy was the third female killed in the last few months. But the theory that Cassidy's death was related to the other two was seeming less likely.
The area of the city where she was disposed of was an inconsistent pattern from what we would have expected with the other cases. Believing that we were now dealing with individual perpetrators, we focused more on our case in particular rather than the collective evidence of all these cases.
Investigators then turned to the strongest evidence they had, the African-American hair found with the body. Detectives went back to talk with Cassidy's neighbor, Gloria Cooper. Cooper had claimed she was not home at the time of the disappearance because the power company had turned off her electricity. Detective Laura Nearing, who was heading up the investigation, decided to confirm Cooper's story with a call to the power company.
They really did have power the whole time. We were given information that their story was incorrect and power had never been cut off to that house. So right away we're thinking they're lying to us, and why are they telling us they weren't there, and why are they using that as an excuse?
Really, this only takes a minute.
This new development prompted detectives to pay another visit to Gloria Cooper's home.
Where were you on December 1st?
This time, her boyfriend, Adam Jenkins, was with her. The detectives asked Jenkins where he was on the day Cassidy disappeared. He said he was out of town. Cooper then gave the detectives permission to look around the house.
So, who has keys to the house?
In one of the bedrooms, they made note of the beige carpeting. It was a similar color to the fibers found on the blankets covering Cassidy's body. There were also no curtains on the windows, nor bedclothes on the bed. If someone in the Cooper house was involved in the murder, then police would have to find a way to prove it. At the St. Louis Crime Lab, Detective Daniel Jackson was processing the tire impressions taken from the alley where Cassidy's body was found. After examining the tread characteristics, Jackson was able to determine the specific make of tire that made the track in the alley.
It came out to be a tire that goes on certain types of trucks, utility vehicles, vans, that sort of thing.
After we learned the information about the tire in particular, and that it was a unique tire, it was important to identify what vehicles were in the area.
Detectives again canvassed the neighborhood.
How you doing, sir? Hey, how you doing?
Their persistence seemed to pay off right away. One resident recalled that on December 9th, the day before Cassidy's body was discovered, he saw a rental truck in front of the Cooper's home at 6:30 a.m. Two African-American men got into the truck and sped off so fast that they struck a mailbox at the end of the driveway.
When the information came back of this truck, a light bulb went on with us. We knew right away this is what we were looking for. We already knew that within the bedding that our victim was found, there were aluminum shavings. We knew right away that this is probably our vehicle. Oh, here's one here.
It was also the kind of truck that would have the type of tires that left the tracks in the alley where Cassidy was found. Now they needed to find it. Nearing checked the yellow pages for truck rental agencies. She found one located near Cooper's neighborhood and sent a detective to investigate.
Great, he's gonna be there.
Cooper's brother, Thomas Brooks, rented the truck on December 8th and returned it on December 9th. The agent showed the detectives the specific truck Brooks rented. The truck was then impounded for processing. The tires were the same make as those identified through the cast impression taken from the crime scene. Comparing them to the plaster casts taken earlier, they found they were the exact tires. Detectives also vacuumed the inside of the truck for trace evidence that might match the paint and other shavings lifted from the blankets covering the body. The truck was dusted for prints. Detective Nearing now had enough evidence to obtain a warrant for a more thorough search of Gloria Cooper's home. While searching Cooper's basement, one of the crime technicians found a pin. It was the same kind used on personal alarms like the one Cassidy carried. The technicians also identified, swabbed, and collected several blood stains from the floor. At the St. Louis County Crime Lab, forensic scientist Alan Derrickson found a positive match between the blood found in Cooper's basement and Cassidy's DNA. Investigators next wanted to talk to the people who had access to Cooper's home.
Information that you don't even know about.
They brought in Adam Jenkins, Gloria Cooper's boyfriend.
You know why we want to talk to you? About the little girl being killed.
The detectives informed him that there was now solid evidence that someone from the Cooper's home killed Cassidy. Jenkins told the detectives that Gloria Cooper didn't kill Cassidy,
and she was murdered,
but discovered her body in the basement.
All she said was that there was...
Jenkins went on to say that Cooper insisted her brother get rid of it. So Thomas Brooks rented a truck, and Jenkins helped him dispose of Cassidy's body in the St. Louis alley where it was discovered.
Did you ever go back to the house where your girlfriend was living?
Detective Nearing then interrogated Gloria Cooper.
Who I've been talking to?
No.
Nearing informed her that her boyfriend told them everything, and that they even knew about the rental truck.
We need your
Cooper
version.
finally broke.
The only version I have, okay, I came home.
She admitted to finding Cassidy's body in the basement and demanding that Brooks remove it. She said she lied to detectives because her brother had threatened to hurt her children if she said anything.
Didn't know what to do, so I called my brother.
Cooper also confirmed that the blanket and curtain in the photos came from her house. She was then placed under arrest for obstruction of justice. Police then picked up Thomas Brooks at his father's home and brought him in for questioning.
10-year-old girls do not approach.
Brooks still denied any knowledge of the incident.
You need to tell me the truth.
But consented to give a hair sample.
Tell me what happened.
When detectives told him that Adam Jenkins rolled on him, his story changed.
Okay.
Brooks admitted the truth.
Pulled the alarm.
He had tried to assault Cassidy.
Went off and it was loud.
She fought with him, and he hit her with a bed slat, killing her. He covered her body with a blanket and hid her in the basement. Brooks then rushed to his job at the fast food restaurant, clocking in 7 minutes late. After confessing, Brooks was placed under arrest. The hair sample Brooks gave to the detectives came up as a positive DNA match to the hair sample removed from the blanket Cassidy was found in. Thomas Brooks was convicted of first-degree murder and kidnapping. He was sentenced to death. Gloria Cooper and Adam Jenkins were both convicted on obstruction of justice charges. There will never be a way to ease the pain of loved ones left behind after a murder has been committed. But thanks to forensic science and its dedicated practitioners, justice is often served for the murders that result in stolen youth.